Welcome to the Why Factor, a chance to work out why we do what we do. BBC World Service podcasts are supported by advertising.
Hi, I'm Nastran Tavakoli-Far. Thanks for downloading this edition of The Why Factor on male friendship. Join us as we try to understand why so many men struggle to get close to each other and what men can do to make better friendships with one another. The band is Struggles with Syntax, otherwise known as Joe, James, Ben and Rory. They have a fairly typical male friendship. They meet up on a regular basis to all do something that they love. Playing some pretty loud tunes.
Generally with my past bands it's been mates, like with James and Rory, and it's like sort of, it's been quite laid back and pretty loose. And then the only band I've been in where it wasn't friends as such, I got fired from.
I've never wanted to be in a band where I wasn't friends with the people.
We've grown closer,
Yeah.
I'd say, especially me and you.
We've gained a friendship.
And we gained a friendship.
So we
I
didn't know
you.
each other before, yeah.
You're listening to the BBC World Service. I'm Nastran Tavakoli-Far, and in between hearing the band play and me awkwardly quizzing them about the nature of their friendship, on this edition of The Why Factor, we're trying to understand why men crave friendships with other men. We want to know, what are the obstacles men face when making friends with each other? We'll be delving into theories from Aristotle to modern-day psychologists. But first, we're going to hear from a group of young boys, some 11-year-olds, about what they mean to each other.
My name is Freddie.
My name is Håkon.
And my name is Thomas.
Friendship is probably one of the most important parts of life. They're basically your family.
Well, friendship is a big thing. Like, if you don't have friends, you'd probably become depressed almost.
If I didn't have friendships with anyone, it'd be playtime, lunchtime, or anywhere in the school would be pretty boring.
Boys start off in early adolescence and late childhood being very clear about their desire for emotionally intimate friendships with other boys.
That's Niobe Way. She's a professor of applied psychology at New York University. Now, Way knows a lot about the inner lives of boys. She's spent the past 30 years interviewing thousands of boys about their friendships.
Certainly includes other girls as well, but the focus really is on wanting that intimacy with other boys. And they'll talk about the desire for that. They'll talk about having close friendships. They'll talk about loving their best friend. They'll talk about not being able to live without him. They'll talk about the most important part is sharing things that are really vulnerable and sensitive for them.
When I moved to Norway, it was probably harder for all my friends in England because, I wasn't there. It was still hard for me because I had no friends, but everything was new.
Me, Thomas and Håkon were like a trio, if you know what I mean. And there was a massive hole where Håkon should have been. I haven't really told these two this, but after Håkon moved, my dad told me that because Thomas and Håkon were best friends, I should try and be there for him. And I was still coping with Håkon going. It was copable, it was fine, but I still had that hold.
So I was really touched by just how open and expressive these boys are about their feelings for each other. The problem is that this sort of openness doesn't always last.
As I began to interview, the same boys year after year, I started to hear the story shift at about 15, 16 years old. You start to hear a much more frustrated, in some cases angry, some cases seemingly depressed language of struggling to hold on to those friendships, struggling to continue to find them or to maintain them. And you also hear another language pop up at the same time, which is they start to say things like no homo when they start to talk about their close male friendships, and they start to say, well, I'm not gay. The point is that a basic human desire for friendship gets turned into a sexuality question by the time they're 15 or 16.
Professor Way is really worried about how this affects teenagers and their mental health.
Male friendships have always been a critical part of healthy human development. And what was interesting to me is that right at that moment when you started to hear boys sound more angry and frustrated and in some cases depressed about the struggle to find someone who really understands them and in which they can express their vulnerable feelings, was right at the age the rate of suicide among boys, at least in this country, jumps up to 5 times the rate of girls. They start to struggle with other directed violence. So the violence that you see among, in schools and in different public settings are almost always boys between 16 and 25.
So this phenomenon of proving one's masculinity by disconnecting isn't just an American thing either. She's also spent time in China and saw some patterns that were pretty similar.
The whole sense of not needing other people, hyper-autonomy, emotional stoicism, that's all part of deeply entrenched in American masculinity. And that gets globalized around the world as what it means to be a man.
You've lived and worked in China for a bit.
Yeah.
Is there something different that you saw?
No, it's the same. I mean, it's so amazing to me as you talk to boys from very different backgrounds, sometimes from rural backgrounds. They sound exactly the same as the New York boys. And they're looking for friendships and they're trying to find the boy who knows their heart. That's the phrase that I hear in Chinese. Boys are starving to know that these feelings are normal. I get emails from around the world from people saying, "You're telling my story. This is what I want."
Now from America to China to ancient Greece via Alexander Nehamas. He's a professor of philosophy and comparative literature at Princeton University.
The most important, where it all begins, is Aristotle's Ethics, 2 whole books of which are devoted to what Aristotle calls philia, which we usually translate as friendship.
Aristotle believed there were 3 kinds.
Some of it, he says, is based on men recognizing the virtues of one another. Some of them are based on a relationship that involves pleasure, so you can talk well together. And finally, there is a friendship that depends on advantage, for example, a business relationship. But the most important kind is the friendship of, as he puts it, virtuous men.
Friendship is a single soul dwelling in 2 bodies. A friend to all is a friend to none. We should behave to our friends as we would wish our friends behave to us. Without friends, no one would choose to live, though he had all other. The antidote for 50 enemies is 1 friend.
Nehamas has also written a book on the nature of friendship from a historical perspective. It's called On Friendship.
Friendship makes one very vulnerable. When I become your friend, I, so to speak, give you power over myself.
It seems like men have always struggled with their friendships.
It's a cliche, right, that men like to think of themselves as individuals. Women are always much more willing to share ideas and feelings and private issues. I think that men are desperate to do the same sort of thing. I don't think most of us know exactly how to do it.
Do you need another lead? Gentlemen, we'll get right.
So usually when you do bands, what's the main reason for wanting to do it?
Like a bit of an outlet for stuff. Obviously, being lads, we're good at talking about these things. That's I find it much easier to shout about things over horrible music rather than talk about it. So.
Well, that's one way of putting it. But perhaps men can make friends by getting together and, doing something with each other. Nehamas says that even men in ancient Greece found it hard to make friends with each other.
The trouble is, apart from the fact that they are only limited to men, Aristotle believes that virtue is a very rare thing. So very few men are capable of genuine friendship for Aristotle.
Can you be very virtuous and also openly show your flaws?
No, I don't think it fits very well with him, because for him, the virtuous people are well-nigh perfect. And nobody is well-nigh perfect. We all have weaknesses and shortcomings and disadvantages and bad black marks in ourselves and in our lives. I mean, there's some friends of mine, for example, whom I like despite the fact that they are pompous. There are other friends of mine whom I almost enjoy when I see them being pompous.
So, Alexander Nehamas doesn't necessarily agree with Aristotle that only virtuous men can have deep friendships. Also, what's interesting is that Nehamas is saying that our weaknesses are crucial to forming friendships, and in fact, perfection gets in the way of that. But, of course, the trouble is that in many societies, men aren't allowed to show these weaknesses to each other. As Niobe Way said earlier, the boys she's interviewed start hiding their weaknesses and struggles from each other as they get older. But teenage boys and Athenian men aren't the only males who can feel starved of friendship.
This is Dr. Jeffrey Greif, professor at the University of Maryland School of Social Work and the author of the book Buddy System: Understanding Male Friendships. Over time, men tend to wax and wane with their importance of their friendships. When a man is young, in his late teens, early 20s, he's going to put a great value on friendships. As he partners, gets married, has children, he turns his eye away from his friends and is more invested in his family, in his wife, in his children, and in his work. By the time he reaches midlife, though, loneliness is on the rise, so it's important to believe in the ability to make new friends.
So, Jeff, we're in this era where we're talking a lot about new gender roles, new forms of manhood. Is that changing how men view their male friendships or even the nature of male friendships themselves?
Yes. When we asked women and men what they admired in each other's friendships, women admired in men that men often told it more like it is. They were more straight up with their friendships. And some women thought that their own friendships could be too needy. When we asked men what they liked about women's friendships, some men liked the emotional accessibility and wished they could be more vulnerable to their male friends, but had figured out that that wasn't going to be too accepted by the male friends.
Despite a lot of the struggles we've already heard about how men find it hard to get close to each other, Jeffrey Greif's research shows that particular groups of men do form stronger bonds than others.
If you are a member of a minority group, if you're a person of color, it tends to not be as safe for you to open up to the majority culture because you have historically been oppressed by the majority culture. Those relationships within group are going to be very good and very strong because they realize that they have to bond together for protection.
And how about class? Does that play into this as well?
Some of the literature on class says that you form closer relationships as a blue-collar or middle or lower-class worker than you do as an upper-class worker. There's not as much competition. You get into law firms and other places with more highly educated people, and there's more one-upsmanship. There's more competition to get ahead.
I got a regular meeting where the main thing you're talking about is what's going on in your life at a personal level.
Paul Atkinson is a therapist and has run and also been in men's groups.
That's transforming. That's really transforming. Just at that very basic level of recognizing that you're a member of the human race and you're a member of this kind of, let's say, rather male experience of what it is to be a human being. And your experience is shared by other men.
So, some explanation first. These are not to be mistaken for men's rights groups. A men's group is something entirely different. They tend to be groups where men get together to intentionally support each other and to talk about their lives and their struggles. Now, I really wanted to hear from Paul about men's groups for this edition, because I was at a conference for male therapists a while back. Yes, that is the sort of thing I do on the weekend. And Atkinson had a talk with another male therapist about the transformative power that men's groups have had on their lives. And several other male therapists also chimed in, sharing their experiences, saying how transformative these groups have been for them. And this is something I'm hearing again and again from a lot of the men who are trying to lead more fulfilled lives. And they all use that word, transformative, when they talk about these groups. We just had to hear more from Atkinson, so we invited him into the studio.
You share what's going on, and you share the difficulties, you share what's going on in relationships, you share how you feel about things and so on. I think for men to discover that it's okay to do that, that's really important.
Why is it so transformative and powerful?
I think because men so readily feel isolated. It's part of the kind of male identity, the culture around being a man. Men get trapped in their ego defenses. That would be a technical way of putting it, so powerfully trapped. And that can be terrifically isolating. There is a tradition of men bonding into all kinds of formal or informal clubs or groupings. But if what you're getting together around is, let's say, sharing your vulnerabilities rather than your prowess, something rather wonderful happens, because that kind of love of each other, if I could put it that way, that appreciation of each other, seems to me to be especially powerful once it gets going. It's like something breaks out and there is a brotherhood, but it's a brotherhood that isn't organised against anything. It's organised for the growth and development and opening of the men in the group.
Men's groups aren't the only positive story going on in the world of male friendships. In recent years, we've seen a different kind of relationship being talked about with real warmth and excitement, the bromance. And one particular bromance has really become especially famous and well-loved.
Welcome to the White House, everybody. As I have already delivered my farewell address, I will try to be relatively brief. But I just want to get some folks together to pay tribute to somebody who's not only been by my side for the duration of this amazing journey, but somebody who has devoted his entire professional life to service to this country. The best vice president America's ever had, Mr. Joe Biden.
Those close and intimate scenes between former US President Barack Obama and his Vice President Joe Biden are really unforgettable. Biden with tears in his eyes as Obama awards him the Medal of Freedom. Obama and Biden holding hands, rubbing shoulders, leaning in to share a joke, the internet breaking out into countless memes about their friendship. Right now, I just put Obama-Biden into Google, and the second term that came up was bromance, something Obama seemed pretty well aware of.
This also gives the internet one last chance to talk about our bromance.
The term bromance is being used to talk about a very close friendship, and two men that really, really enjoy each other, are physically close, emotionally close with each other, and are into each other a great deal. The more you see men in fluid gender roles, the more you see men hugging each other. You look at Barack Obama and Joe Biden seem to have a very close friendship. I think when you have those iconic men and those role models, it gives you greater permission to express yourself both physically and verbally.
So it's interesting you made the example of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. With them, what makes that quite unique? What is the difference between a bromance or that kind of a bond between men and your sort of typical male friendship?
There was a movie called I Love You, Man that came out with Paul Rudd a few years ago, where that was kind of coined of what do you use to describe two men that feel really, really tight with each other? It's not a sexual thing. They're both straight men, and they really enjoy each other. And it's kind of like a romance, but they're not having sex.
So you talked about physical closeness, because this is something I've heard from some men as well, that it's not just sometimes they feel a lack of emotional closeness with other men, but it's that physical closeness. I mean, how important do you think that is in cementing a good friendship between men?
Part of what I'm trying to do with my work is to say that men's friendships come in all different sizes. And just because two men are not physically or emotionally sharing doesn't mean that that's not a good friendship. That men should not define their friendships by the way that women tend to define their friendships, which is more emotional and physical sharing.
We're all working towards this same thing, and the biggest thing is just the friendship. I mean, I've never wanted to be in a band where I wasn't friends with the people. To me, it's always been a band is like a little gang. It is us against the world.
There is something quite awesome about our last gig when you sort of up there playing together. There's a connection. And also when you get off and you're exhausted and sweaty and like, oh, that was awesome. That's kind of like a shared moment I don't get with other friends, you know.
Struggles with syntax may enjoy bonding over a shared love for music, but it seems this really is a strategy that can lead to some really strong friendships in general. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar says music is extremely important for friendships. You may have heard of his Dunbar's number, which states how many people you can sustain social relationships with. That's 150 in case you were wondering. He's sort of a guru of friendships. He says that music forms one of the 7 key pillars of friendship.
What they are really markers of membership of a small community. So it's sharing the same language, having grown up in the same location, and the other 5 are then sort of elaborations of that. It's having the same educational trajectory, having the same interests and hobbies, the same worldview, which is kind of religious views, moral views, political views, having the same sense of humour, and liking the same music.
Music?
Yes. And for strangers, that works even better than any of the others, right? If there you are at the end of the bar in Ibiza or somewhere, and the only other person at the far end of the bar turns out to like the same music as you do, you've just found a friend.
We're going to hear more from Robin Dunbar in next week's episode. We'll be finding out more about friendship, focusing on women and why technology has been a mixed blessing for their friendships. We're in an exciting and also somewhat confusing era where we're redefining gender roles, and there's so much focus on masculinity in particular. Allowing men to be more emotionally open and to show their flaws will let them reach out for the friendships that Niobe Way says they really crave. And of course, there's still room to get close by getting together and just doing something that they love.
When the gypsy lady saw my hand, she said, I wanna be a rock and roll man.
You've been listening to The Y Factor on the BBC World Service. I'm Nastra Antavakoli-Farr. The producer was Alex Lewis, and our editor is Andrew Smith. We've heard that music is a powerful friendship connection for men. Perhaps it's no surprise one of our experts was once in a band. We'll leave you with Jeffrey Greif. Just before we go, do you have any stories from your own life of a friendship, you think's quite special that you'd like to talk about?
I was in a rock band in college called the Kansas City Jammers. It was a trio, and these were 2 men from college that I became very close with. We stayed together after college and played in a rock band full time, and I've stayed very close, especially with one of the guys. This is a guy that's traveled with me. He's as close as a brother. It's a brother from another mother, as they say. And we've just stayed very close, and it's the music that has kept us close all these years.
We love recommending our other BBC World Service podcasts, and we have a new one to tell you about. Kalki Presents My Indian Life.